Julie Inman Grant, thank you so much for joining the Daily Aus. You are the eSafety Commissioner. For anyone who doesn't know what you do you want to just explain the role?
Sure. I didn't come up with the name, but essentially I am the independent regulator for online safety for Australia. Mm-hmm. And our overall mission is to help all Australians have safer, more positive experiences online. When I took the role or was appointed to the role in 2016, we were the first online safety regulator in the world. And for my first 7 years, we were the only one. But that's changed drastically over the past 2 years. And now there are at least well over 30.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so how does your role interact with the government?
Well, I report up into the Minister of Communications. I obviously work for the Minister of the Day. Because I'm an independent regulator, I'm at arm's length from government, so the regulatory decisions I make are my own. And, sometimes I have opinions about policy or legislation that the government may not like, but I do have that independent voice. Interestingly, the eSafety Commissioner was created by the Abbott government when Malcolm Turnbull was the ICT minister. And over time, I've just had different schemes and reforms and different regulatory tools layered on. And I can talk about that if you're interested or not.
Well, so we're talking today because it is the day that Australia's social media ban for those under 16 comes into effect. Do you want to just explain exactly what it is?
Sure. I often compare our approach to online safety very much like Australia has approached its success in water safety. And if you go back to probably when your parents were very young, there were tragic backyard drownings in swimming pools in the backyard. So they mandated that fences be put around every pool, and they're backed with enforcement. That's very similar to what schools, I think, did with the school phone bans a couple of years ago. But when they started talking about the whole idea of banning social media or banning the internet, I said, well, that's kind of like trying to fence the entire ocean. That's an almost futile exercise. Let's think about, even when we put fences around pools, we don't just throw our kids in without giving them swimming lessons. We continue to supervise them. And when we go to the beach, we teach them to swim between the flags. And we teach them about rips, very much like algorithmic rips that can take you out to sea. When they're predators, we put up shark nets. We do all of these things. We take a holistic approach to safety. And I think we need to do the same for online safety as well.
It's interesting, the water analogy, because I've heard people use it in another way where they say, is this ban the government just not teaching young people to swim at all? Have you heard that used in that way?
I haven't, but I think I understand it.
Yeah.
That maybe what they're saying is the only way that you can learn those critical reasoning skills and build that digital resilience is by being there and encountering the content and the conduct. I think there are probably a few flaws with that argument, only in that, we've been doing digital and now algorithmic literacy for more than 10 years.
In schools, you mean?
In schools, but also on our website, we've got webinars. The most popular ones we're doing now are around adolescence and algorithms and how you can curate your feed.
There is this line of thought that if there is harmful content on social media, why not remove the harmful content as opposed to removing young people? What's your response to that?
I think it's a really interesting question. And if I were to be honest, we're never going to cleanse the internet of terrible content just by virtue of the way the internet works. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try. This whole idea of user-generated content, UGC, content is being created every millisecond, really. So I get that argument. I do get that argument, but I think if you think about restrictions we have around alcohol or cigarettes, it's not that you can never smoke and you can never drink, but there is a physiological age at which it is considered maybe not healthier, but that you can handle it more. And I think this is the kind of decision the government is making around social media. Like, it's just not fit for purpose for under 16s. And when I think about my own 13-year-old twins, I think, my son is kind of like not fazed, but this is really devastating for my daughter. She's really distraught because a lot of her world happens on social media.
I'm so interested that your own daughter doesn't like this ban coming into effect. That makes for interesting dinner time conversation.
Well, I kind of have a little laboratory in my own household because I've got 3 teenagers. My 19-year-old is like, why wasn't this in place when I was in high school? Like, my life would have been easier. And like I said, my son was unfazed, but my daughter's really struggling with it. And
does she try to convince you that the ban shouldn't come into effect?
Oh, she's tried. And even my son at one point said, Mom, if you ban Roblox, we'll be pariahs. But I think it's good because it gives me an empathetic lens.
There are early signs that a lot of young people are flocking to apps that aren't on the ban list. How do you decide which apps should be banned and which shouldn't?
Hi, I'm Zara. I'm the co-founder of the Daily Aus, and we started this company because we think news can be done differently. If you agree, you can hit subscribe. It's the best way to help us grow. Now, back to the video.
It all has to do with the definitions in the legislation. I had to use something called a sole and significant purpose test. So if the sole or significant purpose of the app is to encourage social interaction, then it falls into the list. And then it has to have a couple of different features. So what I decided was the most fair thing to do was to develop a self-assessment tool for companies so that they could do it first. But once this law came into place, we had Pinterest say, we're not a social media site, we are a visual search engine. And Snap said, we're not a social media site. No, we're a camera app. And then, of course, YouTube saying that they're a video sharing platform, which, yes, is true, but they also encourage a creator community and comments and interaction. So it was that social interaction. And then the deceptive and harmful design features that helped us determine who was in and who was out.
This might sound like a weird example, but stay with me.
Okay.
Spotify. Obviously, you wouldn't typically consider them to be a social media platform, but they have short form videos. Just a few months ago, they introduced a messaging feature. They also have an algorithm that recommends you content. Something like that, where they are constantly iterating, reiterating. How does legislation keep up with tech companies that are just moving so fast?
And moving fast and breaking things?
Yeah.
That is an excellent question. And that is exactly why we went through this kind of self-assessment process and said there is going to be a dynamic list because features and functionality are being changed all the time.
When you say dynamic, do you mean it will change? Like we could add more social media apps, we could remove some?
Interesting that you say that because some of the platforms that were captured initially came up with ideas. Well, what if we do a stripped down version of, let's say, Snapchat, where we take out the snap streaks and the snap maps and the ephemeral media and the content and stories, and we really are just a messaging app. And I'm like, okay, I'm not sure that it fits with the policy intent, but if you decide to do that, we would have to assess that separately. But to give you an example, Roblox is another case where I was like, okay, it is an online gaming platform. Would the kids be using the chat? If there wasn't the games, probably not. But they're introducing a new service called Moments, which looks like stories, and they're positioning themselves as a metaverse platform. So I had said, hey, we're watching you. If you have more online social interaction features, you may be in.
So they're not currently included, but you're saying that based on features that could change.
Mm-hmm. And same with Spotify. We are talking to Spotify, by the way.
Interesting. Yeah. Good example then.
Yes, perfect. You've got your finger on the pulse.
I want to look at age verification technology. Do you want to just take us through how age verification will work?
Yeah, so there are different levels of age assurance that can be delivered by a social media service. The very bottom level is what we call age gating or self-declaration. It's kind of what we have had today or yesterday, where they say, what is your age? And you put in whatever. So we've said in our regulatory guidance that's not acceptable. Then there are things like facial age estimation. So there are technologies that will basically take a scan of your face, assess your age. But age verification is at the very highest level. So it's actually verifying that you are the person behind the computer screen, and that usually requires something called a liveness test, where you take a selfie to show that is you.
And so as of today, will we all need to verify our age on these social media apps?
I have said that is not reasonable because I felt that if companies just said, we've got to totally age verify our whole user base, one, that would be very expensive for them. And I think a lot of adults would feel that it's intrusive. What a number of these major social media platforms have had in place for at least a decade is something called age inference technologies. So they're picking up all this behavioral data and signals. It could be something as basic as, oh, you've had a Facebook account for 8 years. We can reasonably assume that you're 16 or over.
If I can just lastly ask one question that is a little bit off topic.
Yep.
A US congressional committee has recently asked you to testify over concerns that Australia's Online Safety Act is threatening Americans' free speech, not to do with the social media ban, completely separate. My understanding is that they asked you to appear prior to the 2nd of December. What happened to that?
So this is the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the House of Representatives, Jim Jordan, who's kind of well known for holding a bunch of hearings against people who he thinks is engaging in censorship, particularly of conservative voices. And he asked for a voluntary video committee where he would try and interrogate me. So I just said, hey, I'm sending you a letter back. I'm very busy with domestic responsibilities, but let me explain why nothing we do in Australia violates Americans' freedom of speech.
So you didn't testify before any committee? But you've been speaking to them.
I sent them a letter back. I haven't heard a response. He may not like that response, but I've got a job, and that is to protect Australians. We're rolling out a pretty big policy today. I'm rolling out huge new codes that don't exist anywhere else in the world. And then we've got these protections for AI chatbots.
You got stuff going on.
We've got a busy agenda, and I don't feel like being interrogated and being put all over Fox News. Thank you very much.
eSafety Commissioner, thank you so much for joining the Daily Aus.
Thank you for having me.